As of now, what we have is an indictment in a US court. There is no evidence in any Indian court or even with an Indian investigative agency. That's one of the line of defense that we've heard from the likes of Mukul Rohtagi and Mahesh Jethmalani. To give us the perspective of the Indian opposition, we're joined on this broadcast by Manish Tewari, Member of Parliament of the Lok Sabha from Chandigarh and legal ace in his own right. Mr. Tewari, welcome. I want to start by asking you about the manner in which the opposition is using this US indictment to target the BJP government and the Adani group. You know, the likes of Mukul Rohtagi, the likes of Mahesh Jethmalani say there is no evidence at all before any Indian court. The evidence hasn't been laid out in the public domain. They're asking, why is the opposition believing what's been written in an American indictment to be the gospel truth? Manishi.
Well, I think, again, we are missing the wood for the trees. There are larger institutional and systemic issues at play. And the larger systemic and institutional issues are that there are undoubtedly two indictments which have been presented in the United States of America. One in the Eastern District of New York by the District Attorney, and the other by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So without going into the merits of those indictments, the fact is that it is incumbent upon the Indian Parliament to deliberate as to what kind of a message about India's business environment does this send to the global community. That is the Indian business environment actuated by extraneous considerations. Number two, going back to the Hindenburg Research Report, which came out in 2023, and the subsequent brouhaha over it, which even led to the Supreme Court adjudicating on certain aspects of that particular controversy. The fact is that who regulates the regulator? If the Securities and Exchange Commission was able to find fallacies and anomalies, allegedly with what was happening with the Adani conglomerate, what was the Securities and Exchange Board in India doing? So therefore, the only authority which exercises an oversight remit over the regulators, especially in the financial sector, whether it is the Securities and Exchange Board of India, the Reserve Bank of India, the PFRDA, the Insurance Regulatory Authority, is the Indian Parliament. So therefore, it is incumbent because of the systemic and larger institutional issues at play that there has to be a threadbare discussion on the wider implications of what this US indictment represents.
Defenders of the Adani group are calling this US court indictment a hatchet hit job. They're saying, look at the fact that this is one of India's most prominent corporate groups that's carrying the Indian flag from Haifa to Africa to the United States to Europe, and really aligning with the larger Naya Bharat mission in terms of trying to give India heft on the global geo-economic table. And they think that given that there are competing interests from China, the United States, the charge particularly was that the Biden administration, right before it goes out in a scorched earth attempt, is trying to trip the group so that India's geo-economic aspirations are curtailed and this game remains restricted between China and the United States.
Well, Rahul, they are obviously free to make all these arguments, including the political arguments in a US court of law, where these indictments are going to be adjudicated. Nobody really takes that right away from them. Whether there are any geopolitical interests at play or whether there are any geopolitical conspiracy theories, that is another domain altogether. The US-China relations have not been the friendliest after the the China-Russia entente and the implications that it has on the war currently playing itself out in Europe. But be that as it may, as someone who spent a bit of time in the US, I was a distinguished senior fellow with the Atlantic Council. The one thing that I've understood is that the United States guards its judicial independence very zealously. There is almost a concrete wall
No, but let's see what the government is saying in its defense. They're saying they're willing for a discussion. From what I heard from the Vice President in the Rajya Sabha, from the Speaker in the Lok Sabha, from ministers in the government, they're saying it's not as if we are running away from this debate, but the opposition has just taken up the position, Meri Marzi, I want it now. They're saying, okay, let question hour happen. It can be taken up later. The Speaker can schedule time, allocate hours for this discussion, which is what the government is saying. But the opposition seems adamant that here and now, this and nothing else. Is that a fair democratic approach, Manish ji?
This is absolutely untrue, for the lack of a better word, because there are adjournment motions which have been moved in accordance with the rules both in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. Were the Speaker or the Chairperson of the Council of States were they to accept these adjournment motions and schedule a discussion after the question hour or even after the hour in which you deal with matters of urgent public importance, I don't think there would be a problem at all. This is the same line which was taken in the wake of the Hindenburg research report. At that point in time, it was said that it was actuated by financial considerations of a US short seller. So therefore, that was the defense at that point in time. The defense at this point in time seems to be that there is a huge geopolitical conspiracy. So therefore, be that as it may, the government is open to make all these points on the floor of the House. But you can't run with the hare and hunt with the hound, say that we are ready for the discussion, and then not discuss at all.
You also took this charge to the People's Court in Maharashtra. Rahul Gandhi, the leader of the opposition, made this one of his principal tentpoles of attack. Now, one of the other defenses that we're hearing from the BJP is that the people in the People's Court, these charges have been rejected on Dharavi, on Maharashtra versus Gujarat, on charges against the Adani group. These were charges that were leveled, tested and gauged against the measure of public opinion, and the public chose the BJP handsomely and roundly rejected the Mahavikas Aghadi. How do you look at the public court's interpretation of these charges leveled by the opposition?
Therefore, since going by the defense that you are presenting on behalf of the Bharatiya Janata Party.
I'm only asking questions, Manish, you know that.
I'm not saying that you are an apologist for the BJP. All that I'm saying is that you are articulating the defenses that they are ostensibly putting forth. So my response to that is that they are free to present this defense in Parliament. What stops them from presenting this defense in Parliament? If you can present it outside Parliament, and as I earlier pointed out, that there is this question of who regulates the regulator. You know, there have been questions with regard to the Securities and Exchange Board of India, and therefore, under those circumstances, there are only two authorities that exercise remit over the regulators. Either it is the Indian Parliament, which represents the sovereign will of the people, or it is the Parliamentary Standing Committee of Finance, which acts on behalf of Parliament. There is no third body. Even Government of India does not exercise a regulatory oversight over the regulator. So I don't think there is any reason for the government to be running away from this discussion. And if the government and the chairperson of the Council of State or the Speaker of the Lok Sabha is willing to allocate time to the discussion, that is why all these notices are provided for in the rules.
Let's spend a moment on what we heard from Mukul Rohtagi and from Mahesh Jethmalani. This is on the charges. Now, the two most grievous charges are leveled against the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and against on the issue of obstruction of justice. Now, these legals argue that those specific charges, there are 5 sets of charges in total, but those specific charges haven't been leveled against Gautam Adani and Sagar Adani in the charges. They're leveled against other people, some executives of the Adani group, some executives from the Azure group, but they aren't leveled against Gautam and Sagar Adani. The two most grievous charges are not against these two persona. How do you look at that defense?
Well, they are free to argue that in a US court of law. There is nothing which stops them from arguing precisely this in a court of law where the indictments have been presented. And Mr. Manish Tewari is an eminent lawyer. He is also a nominated member of the Council of States. He obviously has the discretion, if he chooses to present these points of view if and when a debate happens in the Rajya Sabha in the Council of States.
You're also an eminent lawyer in your own right. What do you think will happen next in the court of law?
Well, it would be foolish to make a prediction with regard to judicial processes. Those judicial processes will play themselves out. But as I said, that we are not really concerned with what is the trajectory of those legal battles. What is going to be the trajectory of those legal battles? What we are concerned about are the institutional systemic issues which we have been raising. Now going back to the report of the Hindenburg research.
Mukul Rohtgi and Manish Tewari both questioned the timing of the release of this indictment order, the unsealing of the papers, saying coming as it did just before Parliament session began, and given the fact that this happens again and again, they are alluding to all kinds of conspiracies, including the George Soros hand that's been mentioned so often in the defense that's been put out. How do you look at the suspicious timing of the release, which always somehow seems to happen, coincidentally, happenstance or by design, right before Parliament starts in India?
Well, that's a question they need to address to the White House spokesperson or to President Biden, if at all they can go and meet him, because that's a conspiracy or that's a needle of suspicion which they're pointing in that direction. As I said, this is neither here or there. These are all wild card theories. Ultimately, there are two issues which are at play. Number one, what is the broader message about the Indian business environment post these indictments in the US court? Number two, what were the Indian regulators doing? And as I earlier pointed out, that the only body which exercises oversight of them is the Parliament of India, and therefore Parliament would be abdicating its duty if it does not discuss this threadbare and exercise its oversight function.
Have you received any assurance, any indication from members in the Treasury benches that there will be a debate on this issue in Parliament soon, or will this process of disruption and adjournment lead to a whitewash of the entire winter session of Parliament?
Well, Rahul, you go back a very long time in journalism. May I point out to you that it was the then leader of opposition in the Rajya Sabha, Mr. Arun Jaitley, and the then leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, who had said repeatedly, articulated it publicly, that disruption is a legitimate parliamentary tactic. So you cannot have one set of rules for those people who are in government now when they were in opposition, and for those who are in the opposition now when they were in government. So as I said, the responsibility of running the house is that of the government. We fulfilled that responsibility when we acceded to a joint committee of parliament on the 2G issue in the April of 2011.
Manish Tewari, for joining us with your thoughts on this. Thank you very much. Appreciate you taking our time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you.